everybody! Today I'm going to be making this extra little video about breaking in your corset. It will serve as both a synopsis for my previous corset seasoning mini-series that I made last year, but it will also be a bit of an addendum for experienced corset wearers and how they season their corsets as well. There were some complaints on Facebook about the 2-2-2 rule and how it doesn't work beyond, say, a corset with a 6 or 7 or 8 inch waist reduction. These are some valid points, so I wanted to share with all of you the same thing that I told them. Romantice's 2-2-2 method is a guideline for beginners. You can choose to follow it or not follow it. Many years ago, before I had even read about the Romantice method, there were some corset companies posting instructions online for beginners, telling them that they, when they get their new corset in the mail, they should tie their corset as tight as possible and keep it on for as long as possible on the first wear so it forms quickly to the body. When I had not broken in my corsets properly, I had one corset rip at the seam when I sneezed. I had another corset had the bust that started to break through that center front seam, and I believe it was because I was going too tightly too fast in these corsets. The 2-2-2 guidelines are designed to combat this incorrect and potentially dangerous information to wear your corset so tightly on the first wear. The method actually helps to gently ease the beginner's body into the process of wearing a corset, just as much as it is designed to gently break in the corset itself, make sure the fibers are aligning and settling properly, making sure that the corset is softening and molding to your body. So it is already implied that a beginner would not be starting with a corset of such a huge reduction that you'd have, say, a really wobbly corset with only the waistline touching your body. Although a little bit of flaring at the top and bottom edges is normal if your corset is not completely closed in the back, to have it so huge that you can fit like stuffed animals into your corset, I believe that corset is probably too curvy for you if you're a beginner. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, a lot of authorities were actually recommending that people start with a corset maybe 3 or 4 inches smaller than their natural waist measurement, maybe 6 inches if you were extra compressible. But today I'm hearing of people starting with a corset 7 or 8 or even 10 inches smaller than their natural waist as their very first corset. Now, I can wear a corset with around a 7-inch reduction, but I've been waist training for years and my body knows how to accommodate a corset really quickly as soon as I put one on. This may not be the case for a beginner, so there is such thing as going down too quickly and too fast. And my worry is that if somebody is starting with a corset that's 8 or 10 inches smaller than their natural waist, they're going to want to close that corset really quickly in just a few months. And I don't want them to actually end up hurting themselves. Regardless, nobody is holding a gun to your head and forcing you to season your corset using Romantice's 2-2-2 method. I mentioned in one of my previous corset seasoning videos that there are different methods of breaking in a corset, and there is no one hard and fast rule how to break in your corset. Someone who is very squishy or more experienced with corsets might be able to cinch down more than 2 inches on the first wear, but somebody very new at corseting who might also be very lean or muscular, they might not even be able to achieve a 2-inch reduction from the start. So in that situation, you might actually cinch down less than 2 inches. Another question I get is how long does it take to season a corset? Different corset makers will state that their corsets take different durations to be fully seasoned. Like I mentioned in another previous video, Orchard Corset once said that their corsets take around 10 hours to season, and Contour Corsets, on the other hand, says to take at least 100 hours to season one of her hardcore summer mesh corsets. So obviously there is a spectrum in there, and depending on the brand and the construction methods, you may be anywhere in between those number of hours. The whole point of Romantice's 2-2-2 method is to encourage beginners to ease into the process of wearing the corset and be gentle from the very beginning. One thing that I've noticed throughout the years is that many beginners like to have a system or a set of rules and guidelines to follow until they become more experienced. If this were not the case, then I wouldn't have constant messages and comments on my videos from people asking me how many hours should they wear their corset, what kind of reduction should they wear their corset, how many days per week should they wear their corset, should they wear their corset in the daytime or in the night. And then I get other people asking me, I seasoned my corset at 2.5 inches instead of only 2 inches, is it still going to be okay? Have I ruined my corset? Or say I left my corset on for 8 hours on the first day instead of only 2. I'm bruised and sore, but I'm more worried about the corset. Have I ruined the corset? First of all, you should be more worried about your body than you are about the corsets, because you can always go and buy a new corset. You can't go out and buy a new body. but the 2 hours were put there so that you wouldn't feel sore, or if you had any fitting issues with your corset that would potentially cause, say, bruising, you would be able to notice it before it got too bad. Corsets should never bruise you, by the way, so if you have a corset that bruises you, you may want to consider a different make. These days I have a very intuitive process of wearing my corsets after they're seasoned. You know, I put it on when I want to, I take it off when I want to, I tighten it or I loosen it when I feel the need to. But a lot of beginners, they sort of lack this intuitive process, and they feel the need to first learn the rules, and once you are comfortable and you're more experienced with corseting, then you can break those rules. So when you're more experienced with corsets, you can trust yourself to be more intuitive with how long you wear them and how tightly. And you can see examples of this process of learning rules and then casting them away in other areas. For instance, I wear hard contact lenses, rigid gas permeable lenses, and they correct my astigmatism in part by literally changing the shape of my cornea. When I first got my contacts, I couldn't wear them 14 or 16 hours a day because my corneas were not adapted to the shape of the contact lens yet. So I was given this printout schedule, and you know, the schedule lasted 2 to 3 weeks. Each day I would wear the contacts for, say, 2 hours, or then maybe 3 hours, then 4 or 6 hours, and then drop it back down and bring it back up again. So that would actually help my corneas to adapt to the contact lens so that I can wear them without experience any sort of irritation. Of course, when I get a new pair of contact lenses, I don't have to go through that whole schedule again because I'm already used to wearing them. Also think about, say, doing sports. As a beginner in weightlifting, you may want to have a personal trainer. You may want to follow a certain schedule, do a certain number of reps and sets for a certain muscle group. You can start small, and then once you become more experienced, you can use that experience to tweak your program to what works best for you. But the program that you follow as an experienced weightlifter may not necessarily be suitable for a beginner. But what about me? I've been corseting for years now. I've seasoned over 100 corsets. So why, as somebody more experienced and an intuitive corseter today, why would I not follow an intuitive way of seasoning my corsets? Why do I still follow the 222 guidelines? The reason for this mainly is that I prefer to season all my corsets with the same method. Because I'm doing my weekly reviews of different corset brands, I want to give them all the same treatment prior to review and see how they stand up to the tension. I can actually predict from the very first wear, within 10 minutes of putting my corset on, whether that corset's going to work with my body or not. And you know, there are certain corsets that if I weren't going to review them, I would have tried them on once and then been like, nope, and either sent it back or sold it off to somebody who would actually fit the corset better. But if I'm going to do a fair review, I have to give the corset fair treatment, which means seasoning each corset the exact same way. So unless the review corset is a rental that I need to actually send back to the company, or say a sample that I can't fit into at all, in which case I would review it on Sophie like I did a couple of weeks ago, I like to give each corset roughly 30 to 50 hours of wear before I review it. And you know, if the corset starts stretching at the waistline, or if the grommets start popping out, or if a seam rips even in that short amount of time, then the quality is pretty self-explanatory. But that is my way of sort of doing a quality control on each corset, no matter what the construction, the maker, everything. So I hope that clears up a few things about breaking in your corset. And you know, if you are an advanced corseter, you don't necessarily have to follow the 222 method. It's just what I prescribe to. And so I guess that's it. If you have any other questions, leave a comment down below. If you have other ways of seasoning your corset, whether intuitively or you follow a specific schedule that I didn't mention in these videos, feel free to let us know in a comment below. And I'll see you after the weekend for another video. Bye.